Gaza is in a fight for survival. A home to 2 million people is now a hellscape. Aid operations have stalled, with people forced to scavenge for food. Israel says its mission is to eliminate Hamas and rescue its hostages. But now, louder than ever before, some allies are saying enough is enough and asking whether this is still a war on Hamas or an existential threat to the Palestinians.
This is on a completely different scale now. It's mass casualties, it's utter carnage.
What more evidence do you need now? Will you act decisively to prevent genocide?
We will bring our people home and we will destroy Hamas. We will not relent until we achieve all these vital goals.
Gazans are crying out for help, so who will answer that call? British surgeons trying to save the most vulnerable in Gaza tell us they want the UK to airlift children to safety. We put their calls to the Foreign Secretary.
What will end this suffering is a ceasefire, but if there's more that we can do to support children, of course we will seek to do that.
As dozens more people die in airstrikes on Gaza City, we follow paramedics driving through the front lines of a death zone. Amid desperate scrambles for food, the former UN aid chief tells us war crimes are being committed.
This is unequivocal. Of course it is genocide, just as it is weaponizing aid.
Israel's military strategy is now under intense scrutiny. We ask if now is the time Benjamin Netanyahu stops the fighting. We report from the occupied West Bank, where there's controversial new plans for expansion and this ominous message from the so-called godmother of the settler movement.
Will not be a Palestinian state between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean. Never, ever.
And here I speak to some of the 300 high-profile names speaking out against Israel's actions. The warning from a former UN aid chief that Gazans are suffering a genocide is a startling claim. Later on, we'll hear from the Irish government who back that accusation, and we'll ask one of Benjamin Netanyahu's former security advisors to defend his government. We start, though, with a report on the Gazan children facing death without intervention from the outside world. Speaking to Sky News, British surgeons have appealed to the UK government to help provide life-saving treatment. The children are among the most vulnerable victims of this conflict that's claimed thousands of lives. Let me take a moment to remind you of the loss of life in the Strip up to now. The Gaza Health Ministry says that over 54,000 Palestinians have been killed since the October 7th attacks in 2023. The ceasefire brought with it a brief respite to Gaza's population in January. But since fighting resumed in March, there's been an upsurge in casualties, almost 4,000 people killed in just over 2 months. Our special correspondent, Alex Crawford, has the story of the children of war.
I just have to show you this little guy. This is my favourite little guy.
It's tough viewing. Hatem's only 3, covered in burns from an Israeli airstrike on his home.
It's a massive burn for a little guy like this. He's so adorable. His eyelids are burnt, his hands are burnt, even his feet are burnt.
The voice you're hearing is British surgeon Victoria Rose, who's trying to save his life and many others.
Well, every day there are more and more children that come into our operating theatre that have been blown up. So it's getting harder and harder to get him a slot in theatre to have the dressing changes he needs.
Hatem's family photo album shows him as a happy, healthy boy before the bombing. His father, who was a teacher and seen here with him, was killed alongside his pregnant mother. Hatem is the family's sole survivor. His life now hangs on a thread, his condition swinging perilously from hour to hour, with Dr. Rose monitoring every step.
Unfortunately, he hasn't been too well recently. He's developed some bleeding from his intestines.
His guardian now, and the man who's hardly left his hospital bedside, is his grandfather, who gave us permission to use the pictures of his grandson. He's working with a British charity who's trying to get permission to airlift Hatim and other children to safety and specialist care in Britain. In more than 20 months, the UK's only taken fewer than a handful of the injured from Gaza, just 2 children.
What did children do wrong to suffer such injuries, to be burned and bombed? We ask God to grant them healing.
Look away now if you're squeamish. This is 1-year-old Karam, and he's the other baby identified by the British charity as needing emergency help now. He's suffering from Hirschsprung disease, a birth defect, but easily corrected with the right skills and equipment. His family's fled the bombings multiple times, moving from tent to tent in conditions which make it impossible to keep infections at bay.
No matter how much I describe how much my son is suffering, I wouldn't be able to describe it enough. I swear I am constantly crying.
Gaza's children are suffering horribly right now, with local health officials saying more than 16,000 have been killed, and children making up the vast bulk of their patients, according to the British surgeons inside.
What do you say to a 7-year-old girl who's already had one limb amputated well above the knee and now has to have her other leg amputated above the knee as well? She's 7 years old. She'll be confined most likely to a wheelchair for the rest of her life.
A young girl picks her way through the fire after an Israeli airstrike on a school being used by dozens of families as a shelter. More than 30 bodies were recovered from this. The little girl lost her entire family, her parents and siblings, and is scarred both physically and emotionally after witnessing their deaths in the inferno. I saw a lot of fire, she says. A big, big fire, and I was scared of it. So many children suffering so much trauma. The Israeli military continually justifies these bombings, including this one, by saying the shelter was harbouring Hamas fighters without providing any evidence. The British charity Project Pure Hope insists there's no justification for attacks which continually see the youngest hurt and maimed. They've written to the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary to allow Britain to do its bit to help Gaza children.
Most of the people affected by this catastrophe that's unfolding in Gaza are children. And children are the most vulnerable. They have nothing to do with the politics. And we really just need to see them for what they are. They are children, just like my children, just like everybody's children in this country, and we have the ability to help them.
Those on the ground in Gaza say it's way past the point of taking urgent action.
Every time I come, I say it's really bad, but this is on a completely different scale now. It's mass casualties, it's utter carnage. We are incapable of getting through this volume. We don't have the personnel, we don't have the medical supplies, and we really don't have the facilities. We are the last standing hospital in the south of Gaza. We really are on our knees now. He looks really good.
The surgeon's skills and determination are what's keeping Hatim alive right now, but it'll take much more than that to save him and the thousands of other children suffering in Gaza. Alex Crawford, Sky News.
Well, so far, the UK has taken in 2 Gazan children needing urgent medical attention. In response to Alex's film, the Foreign Secretary David Lammy has said he will look to do more to help. Have a listen.
The scale of the medical catastrophe for children and the population of Gaza is horrendous, and that's why we increased our aid, particularly our medical aid, back when we came into government. It's why, too, that we did see the first children coming for treatment in the UK. Now, in the end, what will end this suffering is a ceasefire, but if there's more that we can do to support children, of course, we will seek to do that.
Other human rights groups are now accusing Israel of a genocide in Gaza. Is that happening, do you think, and how important is it to stop that if that's the case?
We've been very clear that the scenes of children dying, the horrors of people not being able to get aid is unacceptable.
Is it a genocide, though, do you think?
I was clear back in September that we did believe that there was a clear risk of a breach of international humanitarian law. That's the law as it exists in the UK, and for that reason I suspended arms sales that could be used in Gaza.
That was the Foreign Secretary David Lammy speaking to our International Affairs editor Dominic Waghorn there. Well, to even stand a chance of survival, victims like those you saw in Alex's report rely on the help of daring paramedics racing between bomb sites and hospitals. Ambulance crews have been sharing their stories with us. Let's bring in our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle. And Ali, you've been speaking to some of these heroes, really, these extraordinary paramedics who have been risking their own lives to try and save the lives of others.
Well, we've heard many times before that the medical facilities in Gaza are on the brink of collapse, and the same goes for the ambulance service, an integral part of the wider medical service. And tonight we hear that Al-Alda hospital in northern Gaza is going to be forced to close because it's now falling within an evacuation zone. So they will evacuate the remaining patients tomorrow, but they cannot take out the medical equipment because the roads nearby are too damaged. It's the latest blow to Gaza's medical facilities. But as I say, at the heart of a lot of it are the paramedics working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to go to the scene of airstrikes. And I should warn you that my report contains the immediate aftermath of many of those airstrikes.
This was seconds after the Israeli military hit a marketplace in Gaza City today. People can be seen writhing on the floor in agony. A few try to sit up, but collapse again. There was nothing the medics could do for the victims when they arrived. Bodies were heaved onto stretchers, their mutilated arms and legs twisted. Body parts are picked from the debris and wrapped into a sheet. Just another day in Gaza. The Gaza paramedics are on the front line of this war every single day. The relentless Israeli bombardment puts their lives in danger as they rush to the scene of airstrikes to help retrieve the dead and wounded. Our team has filmed with the ambulance crews in Gaza City over a number of days this week. It is Tuesday afternoon, and an Israeli strike has hit a building in the city. The fire is burning, but everyone has managed to escape. 4 people have been wounded. No one was killed in this strike. These paramedics are based at Shifa Hospital in Gaza City. Even back at their base, they aren't safe and can't properly relax. The hospital has come under attack many times. Also, there simply aren't that many of them, certainly not enough. And now, to make it worse, fuel for the ambulances is running low because of the blockade. The war is nearing its 20th month. They've been on call for more than 600 days now. The endless rescue missions and high number of civilian casualties take their toll.
The scenes we witness, children, severed limbs, the wounded, what affects us the most is the children. Sometimes after responding to an incident, you begin to imagine the injured children as your own relatives. These images get mixed in your mind.
The roads often become blocked by the fighting, as every day new areas are designated Israeli military combat zones. The paramedics need to adapt their journeys. Getting it wrong could be a lethal mistake. Paramedics and rescue workers have been killed during the war. Alaa al-Hadidi was hit in a drone strike. He was buried by his colleagues. Every one of them knows it could have been them.
Safety? No, there is no safety. Right now, there is no safety. When we respond to an airstrike, the drones are overhead. In the first round of airstrikes, they targeted my colleague in one of our vehicles.
It is around 1 a.m. on Wednesday morning. A three-storey building has been hit with 20 people inside. There is chaos as the team arrive on the scene. The body of a young girl in her pajamas is immediately handed to them. She's dead. Standing on the ruins of the apartment block, they pull another body covered in dust from under a massive slab of concrete. Another one dead, this time a young man. In a few hours, it'll be dawn, a new day. The paramedics will have to be ready to go again.
Ali, powerful reporting there, really difficult to watch some of those scenes. But of course, increasingly there's been international pressure on Israel to bring this war to an end. And there has been talk of another potential ceasefire deal. Just tell us where we're at with that.
Yeah, I mean, there's been rumblings all week, and there have been various things moving into place. Ron Dermer, a very senior and key aide to Benjamin Netanyahu, who's been in Washington this past week. There's been talks ongoing in Qatar, but really over the last couple of hours, things have started to move. So what we know is that the White House has put together a new proposal. It's a proposal that is basically based on previous proposals, but just tweaked slightly in the hope that it can bring the two sides together. We think it would be a 60-day phase ceasefire, of which 10 living hostages would be released and 18 of the dead hostages would be released. The IDF would not fully withdraw from Gaza. They would remain in parts of Gaza, and there wouldn't be a guarantee to end the war, although there would be wording within the truce agreement that the United States would pursue a final end to the war during that period. The White House tonight has said that Israel has already signed off on it. We are waiting to see what Hamas have to say. They've indicated this does not meet their demands, but there is an awful lot of pressure on them. There's a huge amount of speculation here tonight. Just before I spoke to you, Yalda, I was looking at a local newspaper website, and they had two headlines. One said, Saudi source, a ceasefire will be announced within hours. And then below that it said, an unnamed foreign source, the two sides aren't even close yet. So we're all waiting, but you can imagine the wait going on in Gaza and for the families of the 58 hostages who they want to get home.
Yeah, absolutely tense and difficult moment. Thank you very much, Ali. Well, Martin Griffiths was UN aid chief at the start of this war. Speaking to me for this special programme, he accused Israel of carrying out a genocide against Palestinians in Gaza, a claim denied by Israel. Here is Mr. Griffiths giving his justification.
The International Court of Justice, a year ago or more, stipulated very clearly the obligations of these states in Europe and elsewhere to take action to stop what could be a genocide, as they said at the time. But we haven't seen that happen. We haven't seen arms trades completely stopped. We haven't seen industrial investment reviewed and stopped when it is supporting any kind of genocidal actions by Israel. And we haven't seen the kind of condemnation of atrocities leading to investigations, leading to evidence, leading eventually to some kind of indictment and punishment.
Well,
We've seen
Martin,
nothing.
If you're saying those things haven't happened, and we're hearing increasingly people describe the situation in Gaza as a genocide, including the Irish government, are you saying that that's now happened because, what had been calls to prevent genocide from taking place didn't happen?
I think so. I mean, we have failed. We have all failed Gazan people. And the Palestinians of the West Bank as well, as we've been hearing these last days. Of course we have failed them. We have failed them through no protection, through no action, through no retaliation, through no justice, all the points that I know you make frequently. It's not just Western governments, it's the peoples. And the peoples are angry because they have seen their views disregarded for this last year or more. And of course, the humanitarian agencies equally so. And that's why Tom is, I think, rightly very, very stern about this. So we haven't done what we should have done and what the Court of Justice told us all we should do last year, in the summer of last year. So that's either double standards or delinquency. But what it really is, it's allowed us to get to this point of mayhem in Gaza, of starvation and death in Gaza, and of impunity in the West Bank.
So you do believe what we are now seeing as a result of inaction and not allowing aid to get into the territory, and for this bombardment and killing to continue, you do believe it's genocide?
I do. You know, I'm a lawyer, actually, Yalda, probably not something many people know, nor even me. So I've been, messing around with the issue of declarations and adjustments and assessments. But I think now we've got to the point this is unequivocal. Of course it is genocide, just as it is weaponizing aid. We don't need to look behind ourselves to see that that's the case. And that should encourage us even more, because of course we all doubted whether it come to that level of definition. We all doubted whether famine was actually there. I think starvation is killing people. That's bad enough. We don't have to worry about famine, which is obviously there lurking in the shadows. But also genocide. Of course, that's what's happened. And we only need to look at the statements by Prime Minister Netanyahu, who has the virtue of being very clear about his objectives.
That was Martin Griffiths there. So how will Israel respond to those claims by the former UN aid chief? Well, joining me now is Professor Jacob Nagel, former acting national security advisor to the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Thank you so much, Mr. Nagel, for joining us here on the programme. You heard there Martin Griffiths describing the situation in Gaza now as genocide. I also want to...
You mean the Hippocrates, Martin? It's so nonsense. It's saying so much.
Okay, well, we can get to that. If you just allow me to ask my question, I was just going to ask you. We've heard there what Martin Griffiths has said. Okay, well, that's what Martin Griffiths has said to us this evening. I just want to also read to you what your allies, UK, France, Canada, have been saying. They've been saying the bombardment is wholly disproportionate, the civilian death toll is intolerable, and the denial of aid unacceptable. This is not just, someone who formerly worked at the UN. These are your allies saying this now.
I'm really glad that you're also talking about what the United States is doing and what the others. And I'm sure that our friends, together with you, will talk a lot about what the genocide that the Hamas terrorist is bringing on their people, using their children and women and men.
But sir, can I just ask you to respond?
Sorry, I'm in the middle of an answer.
I know, but I don't want to go... I want you to focus on... I want you to...
This question. No, I'm sorry. You asked me, now I'm answer. I didn't see that you disturbed the previous one that you just interviewed, even not in one word. So you have to ask these questions, the terrorists of the Hamas that massacred, murdered, butchered, and raped 2,000 of our people without us doing anything. Why you are not asking them this question?
We ask on a daily basis.
Why you are not asking them the question?
But I need you to respond to what Israel is
and allowing their people to live. They can
Mr.
leave.
Nagel, can I just get you to respond to the questions I'm asking?
I responded because everything that you said is totally nonsense and rubbish. Because Israel is not doing it.
Your response cannot just be. Your response cannot be to what your allies are saying. You know, this is what Hamas is doing.
Okay, you ask me, okay? You want to ask UK and France? Ask them. You ask me.
Okay. Well, let me tell you. Let me tell you what Israelis are saying.
No, let me answer you.
Well, let me tell you what
is going now in Gaza.
Let me tell you, sir, what Israelis are saying. If I may, Yair Golan, the former deputy chief of staff of the Israeli army, is saying.
If you want to quote me, people. If you want only to quote people and not allowing me to tell, for you don't need me for this interview. You can go to your viewers.
Go ahead,
quoting
sir.
people. No, you ask me a question. Let me answer this question. Okay? You ask me what's going on in Gaza. What's going on in Gaza now is the Israelis the most humanitarian people in Gaza. Who brought this aid there and who confiscated this aid, selling it in 100 and 2,000 and 5,000 times more than the market to their people, and making sure that the children and the normal people of Gaza will not want to have this food that Israel is bringing in, that the Hamas wants to stop.
You had an aid blockade for 3 months on the people of Gaza. For 78 days, you had no aid going into Gaza. If you don't want to listen to what France and the UK and Canada are saying, I'm going to quote you what your former Prime Minister has said, Ehud Olmert.
I don't want to hear.
Ehud Olmert has described the situation as a war crime.
The quotes of people that are against Israel. Sorry, not Ehud
Olmert is against Israel.
No, Ehud Olmert was in. Sorry, you know who is Ehud Olmert. I don't want you to quote me Ehud Olmert. If you want to quote me Doron Dermer or Prime Minister Netanyahu, I'm willing. Or even Stephen Witkoff, that now putting on the table a proposal for the Hamas. The Hamas
you don't want to hear what
the Hamas can end the suffer of their people that they caused it in the massacre of October 7 in 1 second. They have to leave Gaza. They have to bring back. They have to bring back the hostages, and the suffer is gone. Why you are not asking this the Hamas people? I don't understand.
So I interviewed Hamas just a few weeks ago, and I asked them about the hostages. I am now talking to you, and I do have a right to ask you what the former deputy chief of staff, a hero of October 7, someone who went out
He's not
and
an hero
fought
of October
Hamas
7. You made him
terrorists
from him
on
an hero.
October the 7th. Yair Golan went out as a reservist to fight Hamas, has said a sane country does not wage wars against civilians, does not kill babies as a pastime, and does not engage in mass population displacement.
If you want to read all of your papers, it's okay, you will get your money. And what I'm saying is, if you ask questions, let me answer the question. And don't quote people that are not heroes of October 7, but only by themselves. What I'm saying is that the Hamas and the people that are making all this suffer for 99% of the people of Gaza, they can finish this suffer in 5 seconds or in 5 minutes or in 5 hours. For example, it's a very, very, very tough choice what Stephen Witkoff is not putting on the table for Israel. But the Prime Minister of Israel said yes. There are many people in Israel that don't like it. But in order to bring back at least half of our living hostages and half of our dead soldiers and people, he said, okay, we are willing to say ceasefire of 60 days.
Okay,
we'll go and we give all the aid that is needed. Now, what Hamas wants, he doesn't want the aid to go to the people of Gaza. He wants
I just need to understand. I need to understand what Israel's position is. And you want me to put to you what the finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, declared. He said that Israel is destroying everything left in the Gaza Strip. They are cleansing Gaza. That is what Bezalel Smotrich said. He said the army's operation aims to occupy and cleanse areas in Gaza.
You are interviewing yourself. Let me talk. You are talking all the time. I don't understand.
Well, you're not answering my question. You said you don't want me to quote former people. You want me to quote government ministers, and I'm putting that to you.
Because you are always putting quotes and quotes and quotes because you have...
the finance minister of Israel is saying the army's operation aims to occupy and cleanse areas in Gaza.
Then maybe you can interview me, and I'm telling you, in 1 hour, the Hamas can finish all the suffer. Why you are not asking this question? They can give back the hostages that they killed and butchered, and they can go out from Gaza, give out their weapons, and tomorrow there is the prosperity for the people of Gaza. This is what we have to do. Why you are not asking this question? This is the people that are bringing genocide and suffer to their people. Those are the people that you have to ask the question.
If you just allow me, you keep repeating why I'm not asking Hamas. I am asking Israel as a responsible state.
Then ask what you
you're
want,
comparing your actions to that of Hamas. I'm asking you, what is Israel's policy? Your finance minister is saying the army's operation aims to occupy and cleanse areas in Gaza. Is that the policy of Israel?
Let me answer. You ask me, let me answer. If you want to ask the finance minister, ask him. The policy of the country of Israel is that Gaza should be totally disengaged from Israel civilian, and someone have to take care. I am not saying the policy of the government of Israel that Israel should not occupy Gaza. Read the real policy of the state of Israel. But no Hamas terrorist can stay in Gaza. No weapons that are threatening our civilians can stay in Gaza. No threat to our civilians that are very close to the border can stay in Gaza. Now, if Hamas will give up his weapons, will give the hostages back, will give back the dead people, and will go out from Gaza, Gaza can flourish again like it was 27 years ago. I was visiting Gaza every Friday to the market.
Well, you haven't told me anything, taken responsibility for anything that Israel has done over the course of the last 20 months. You've just outlined to me what Hamas
making sure
is doing.
that our hostages is coming back, that our people is coming back, that Hamas people that are the one to blame for what is happening will pay the price. Now, the problem is that the Hamas
that's the killing of civilians. That's the killing of tens of thousands of children
Hamas people
and women.
are taking the civilians as human shields, and they are making the civilians paying their price.
We'll have to leave it there,
this is the problem. This is the problem. That
we'll
the
have to
Hamas
leave it
leaders
there.
and the Hamas terrorists are making the civilians paying the price instead of them.
Mr. Nagel, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Now, the fight for survival in Gaza is not only against weapons from the sky, but as we've been hearing from the former UN chief, the threat of famine. A nearly 3-month Israeli blockade that was slightly eased in recent days has provoked new accusations that starvation is being used as a weapon of war. Well, on Wednesday, a UN World Food Programme facility was overrun by hundreds of people. Afterwards, hospital officials said 4 people died in the rush. That followed another deadly incident at an aid site in Rafah just a day earlier. Well, I've been looking deeper into the issues that amplified this humanitarian crisis. The scenes in Rafah this week come as hunger stalks the Gaza Strip. Israel had placed the territory under a total blockade from March until May, 78 days in which no food, water, fuel or medicine entered the enclave. From analysing satellite imagery and video on the ground, the Sky News Data and Forensics Unit can show the extent of the situation. Since October the 7th, until the blockade started, there was an average of around 1,200 trucks going into Gaza every week. The pre-war average is nearly double that number. Over the 5 days since the blockade ended, trucks containing vital supplies of things like flour, baby formula and medical supplies entered Gaza. But there were just 388 of them. Look how far below the line it is, and also way below the 500 per day the UN says are needed. The United Nations Relief and Works Agency told us most of these trucks were looted soon after. Just who is to blame is disputed. The IDF says it's Hamas, while the UN blame armed gangs operating in areas which are supposed to be under Israeli control. The UN's Sam Rose described a looter's valley in the south between Kerem Shalom and Khan Yunis, where they say trucks would frequently be attacked. A photo posted last week showed a Palestinian man in military gear carrying an AK-47 with UN cars visible in the background. It's more than 3 kilometres inside an IDF-declared combat zone. The picture came from the Facebook page of this man, Yasser Abu-Shabaab, who multiple aid officials have named as a gang ringleader, though he denies his men were involved in the looting. The new US-backed aid system has said its continued distribution on Wednesday, claiming delivery of 800,000 meals. This was the scene on Tuesday as people were unpacking the boxes. Aid groups, however, have said the new system puts the lives of 1 million Palestinians in the north at risk by forcing them to travel to the south to get to it. 3 of the 4 aid hubs are located in the far south, with 1 located in the central region. And not only that, but the distribution centres are all located inside areas that the Israeli military has previously declared as combat zones. The compound overrun on Tuesday is one of those. Even Palestinians who set up camp as close as possible to the aid hub must make a 5-kilometre round trip through one of the combat zones to get to food. The incident on Tuesday resulted in at least 47 Palestinians injured when a crowd overwhelmed the aid hub. The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres said last week Israel had only authorised for Gaza what amounts to a teaspoon of aid. With the new system's loss of control and recent resignation of its director, questions will be raised on how vital supplies get to those in need long-term. Well, earlier we heard the former UN aid chief accuse Israel of genocide. It is an accusation that has been echoed by the government of the Republic of Ireland. Well, let's speak now to Neale Richmond, Ireland's Minister of Foreign Affairs. Mr. Richmond, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme. Just tell us a little bit more about Ireland shifting its position, and is it now officially calling Israel's actions genocide?
Well, that's certainly the term used by our Deputy Prime Minister this morning in Parliament, and indeed that's a term that's been used by quite a number of actors, including, Amnesty International and many other NGOs for a lot longer. But to be quite frank, whatever term you want to use, innocent civilians, women and children, are dying in huge numbers every day in Gaza. Your previous guests very passionately described how Hamas, a brutal, illegal terrorist organisation, are using innocent civilians as shields. And he may have a point in that regard. But ultimately, Israel is using hunger as an act of war. Israel is targeting civilians by what we've seen is an over 60-day humanitarian aid blockade of Gaza. Irish Aid, the Irish aid agency, has had 2 trucks stuck in Jordan for the last 60 days. Now, let's talk about what are in these trucks. It's very, very basic equipment. We're talking about tarpaulin and tents so people can have shelter at night during cold months because their homes and apartments have been blown up. We're talking about very basic foodstuffs, grains, flour, to have the most basic of maybe 1 meal a day. We're talking about medicines, really basic medicines, because we know and we have evidence that clinical procedures and operations are taking place without anaesthetics.
Well, and surely Israel knows what's in these trucks as well, and yet they're not being allowed in. And you referred there to my previous guest. It feels in many ways that he is a reflection of where the Israeli government currently is that, they're frankly not willing to move an inch on any of these issues.
No, they're not. And we have no problem saying October 7th was a horrendous, brutal, vicious terrorist attack. All hostages absolutely should be freed. And Hamas is a horrible terrorist organisation that should be disbanded. But I think the actions of the Israeli government stand in stark contrast to the opinion perhaps of the Israeli people, but also the fact that we talk on one hand about Hamas, an illegal terrorist organisation, and we talk about Israel, a liberal Western democracy that is part of the United Nations, that is signed up to international law, and they're breaking it on an hourly basis. We are watching scenes unfold on a daily basis in Gaza that are absolutely horrific. This is a part of the world that is on the verge of famine due to the decision of this Israeli government. They quite clearly have the blood of civilians on their hands.
And do you feel, though, that the United States, the Trump administration, frankly, needs to now step up its pressure on the Israeli government to say enough is enough and you need to stop now?
the US government, be it the Trump-led administration or the Biden-led administration, should have done this months and months ago. 3 things need to happen with a matter of urgency that I cannot convey properly on this show. First and foremost, we need to see real humanitarian aid being let into Gaza. What we have seen so far is a sick joke. It is trickle of humanitarian aid that isn't getting in the sheer numbers that are allowed. Secondly, we need to see an immediate ceasefire. We need to see people stopping the bombing and the attacks. And thirdly, we actually need to see proper negotiations. This war has to end. This brutal war has to end as soon as possible. And we need to see real pressure applied, not just by the United States, but by the European Union, of which Ireland is obviously a constituent part, and indeed by the British government. And we have seen over just the last 10 days serious moves. I recognise the British government's decision to suspend trade talks, and I also recognise the decision by a majority of EU states to review Article 2 of the EU-Israeli Trade Association Agreement based on the very clear opinion of the Irish, Spanish, Slovenian, Dutch and other governments, including Luxembourg, that Israel is carrying out mass human rights abuses in Gaza and indeed in the Western Bank.
Mr. Richmond, Ireland's Minister of Foreign Affairs, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme. Now, hundreds of high-profile figures, including stars of stage and screen, have called for an immediate ceasefire. Earlier, some of them, including the actors Steve Coogan and Juliet Stevenson, held an event in Westminster where the names of children killed in the war were read out. I went down to speak to some of the speakers.
Abdel Rahman, Hakam, Jamal Abdul Shah. Those are not just statistics, they're real people, they're real children who had lives, who died, and it's to some way go to some extent to humanise them.
Do you think the international community, the UK, France, Canada, condemning what's happening is sufficient?
But certainly more material things need to be done. We need to stop sending arms to Israel right now. I think that would be a very important signal.
Mohammed Ziad Hassan Abu Aida. When people talk about being frightened to speak out, I don't have a lot of patience for it. You know, we are human beings. Everybody has to imagine what it would be like to be living in that nightmare, that hellscape, and act as human beings. It's a moment in history that we cannot overlook. Everybody needs to step up.
Maher Asad Maher Abu Lashib, 5 years old. Mahmoud Mahran Muhammad, 5 years old.
Do you think increasingly people are saying enough is enough?
I think it's tragically, it's taken the mass indiscriminate killing of innocent people to get to this stage, but it would have been difficult just to stick your head above the parapet. In fact, it was 18 months ago, but I don't think it is anymore. I think more and more people are realising that it has to stop.
There was Steve Coogan there alongside hundreds of other celebrities urging action over Gaza. Now, Israel's military strategy is facing intense scrutiny and its Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is facing growing criticism. He is now battling 3 major crises. Gaza represents a wasteland. It is a humanitarian disaster. But Netanyahu is urging the IDF to expand its military operation within the Strip. That has led to a schism with allies. The likes of the UK, France and Canada have issued strong calls for an end to the fighting. While the EU's top diplomat says the war goes far beyond what is necessary to fight Hamas. At home, Mr. Netanyahu faces protests and accusations of behaving unconstitutionally. Among those angry at his leadership are hostage families desperate for loved ones to come back. Prime Minister Netanyahu maintains the war is necessary to eliminate Hamas, but can he still argue that case? Our military analyst Michael Clark has given us his assessment.
As soon as President Trump left the Middle East after his recent trip, Israeli defense forces moved back into the Gaza Strip in some force, as they'd said that they would once the presidential trip was over. Thousands of IDF reservists have been called up for this, and we've witnessed Merkava 4 tanks moving back into Gaza in a strength not seen since November 2023, when IDF ground operations really began. Before Operations Gideon's Chariots was launched, these were the evacuation zones then in place. The IDF has now extended those zones where they say civilians should leave yet again and move into designated safe areas. From the IDF's perspective, the evacuation zones are their fighting zones, the areas where they claim the right to regard anyone left there as a Hamas enemy. So this is what the IDF's current fighting zone looks like. It runs along the Philadelphia corridor at Rafah along the border with Egypt. It runs along the Netzarim corridor north of Khan Yunis and south of Gaza City. And those zones will allow the IDF to cut the strip into 2 and in due course 3 separate sections for clearance operations. All that is achievable since Hamas has long been beaten in a military sense, so it's easy to see what IDF tactics on the ground are. But it is harder to discern the strategy behind those tactics. The IDF seem to be indicating that they will commence a classic counterinsurgency operation in Gaza, working to eradicate Hamas from each zone as they move on to the next, cornering the enemy into a small area before finally destroying them. But that only makes sense if the population stays where it is and is then made to feel more secure, more prosperous and far better off without Hamas around. Increasing the misery of the population by cornering them into a small zone doesn't make any sense as a counter-insurgency strategy. The IDF's fighting zone now amounts to almost 80% of the territory. And that means that the key ultra-nationalists in the government say something completely different. They say that the strategy is for a full reoccupation of Gaza, with space for Israeli settlers to move back in. They say that the misery of Gardens will encourage them to want to move abroad if given the chance. Prime Minister Netanyahu himself has not committed to this, but he continues to talk about complete control over Gaza, whatever that means. Militarily, the IDF could take control of the whole territory, and it could cope with an angry and distressed population of 2 million Gazans herded into not much more than 20% of their own country. But on the simple arithmetic of how many troops it takes to hold an angry population in check, the majority of the IDF and its self-deployment reservists, thousands, would be fully deployed just doing that for a long time. You know, that's hard to square with a meaningful political victory over Hamas of the sort that Prime Minister Netanyahu demanded some 20 months ago.
Professor Michael Clark there. Well, questions for Benjamin Netanyahu in Gaza and in the West Bank, where Israel has announced plans for the biggest expansion of settlements in decades. Well, the settler movement traces back to 1967 when Israel captured Palestinian territory during the Six-Day War. 700,000 Israeli settlers currently live in the West Bank and East Jerusalem in communities considered illegal under international law. Our international correspondent Alex Rossi has this report from the West Bank.
These images show Jewish activists trying to stop Israeli settlers from taking over the centre of Ras Al Ain, a community in the West Bank.
You can see that the land was furrowed, I think you say in English, by the settlers.
What is unfolding here is not just a land dispute, it is the systematic displacement of Palestinians, according to human rights groups.
So in front of us, up the hill, we can see the illegal outposts.
Rachel Abramovitz is a member of Looking the Occupation in the Eye. They try to deter settler attacks.
And what they do, they gradually invaded the community, they expand, they terrorize the people.
And there's a purpose to that, isn't there?
There's a purpose to terrorize the people, to put them to flight, to cause them...
To make them move?
To make them move and leave the place. My fear is that all of these places will become taken over by Israelis. I think we won't be able to push it or to prevent it for long.
Salam Ka'abneh's family has lived on the land in Ras Al Ain for more than 50 years. Now, with a surge in attacks, he fears they may be forced from their home.
They stole more than 2,000 sheep from us and we face daily assaults. At night, they attack and frighten our women and children. They throw stones and fire bullets into the compound. They drive around in cars, creating chaos and problems. We suffer greatly. Now we're surrounded as if under siege.
I feel the tension in my chest right now.
We wanted to understand more about the settlers' activities, so we went to the hilltop above Salam's hamlet, where they'd moved in. So we've just been at the Palestinian community, which is just over here, and we've seen what's been going on. Up this road is the Israeli settlement. It's an outpost. It was established here about 15 months ago, and there's lots of, they look like kids running towards us now. Not sure what kind of greeting we're going to get, but we're going to try and ask them what they've been doing and why they've been doing it. But it looks like they're not going to let us to go any further forwards.
We're not looking for provocations or problems.
But we didn't get far. The atmosphere hostile. The car was quickly surrounded.
Okay.
It became clear we were not welcome.
Yeah, you can probably turn here.
We left without answers, but with a deeper understanding of the fear under which these vulnerable Palestinian communities are living. The Israeli military, as the occupier, is responsible for the security of the Palestinians here. But more and more settlers act with impunity.
I would say it's daylight robbery of land supported by the Israeli authorities, and it amounts to ethnic cleansing of large parts of the West Bank from their Palestinian inhabitants in order for the area to be used by Israel and for Israeli uses.
This is Rossi from Sky News. Nice to meet you.
Shalom, nice to meet
This is Ed. International condemnation of settler violence is growing. The British government sanctions several prominent figures, including Daniela Weiss, who's known as the godmother of the settler movement. But despite the backlash, she's now pushing plans to establish new settlements, this time in Gaza.
We have more than 1,000 families enrolled in these 6 groups. They are planning to move to Gaza. Some of them, no, all of them are ready to do it right away, notwithstanding how dangerous the area is.
Palestinians live here at the moment.
Okay, so if Palestinians leave, then Jews can leave. What's the problem? Palestinians live here, so Jews will live here.
So the Jews will push the Palestinians out?
We do not have to push them. They want to go. It's hell for
They want to go
Arabs.
because they're being bombed.
No, the Arabs want to go because the Hamas tortures their own families.
It has nothing to do with the fact that Israeli military has dropped huge tonnage of bombs.
No. Israel, whatever Israel does, is just to prevent the next attack, God forbid, on Israel.
And she told us the sanctions will only accelerate settlement expansion.
There will not be a Palestinian state between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean. Never, ever. We annex with facts on the ground. The goal is clear: to prevent any option of establishing any kind of state, entity, whatever you call it, in the heartland of Israel. If Netanyahu wanted to stop me, he could stop me.
The Israeli government says the accusations of ethnic cleansing are baseless and have no foundation in reality. But human rights groups say what is happening here has gone far beyond creeping annexation, where the Palestinians hope to build a state is disappearing under Israeli settlements, and with it the prospect of a two-state solution to resolve this conflict. Alex Rossi, Sky News, in the occupied West Bank.
The tensions there in the West Bank. So how can this conflict with so much history ever end? If Hamas steps away from governing Gaza as part of a ceasefire deal, who will lead the population there? Well, let's bring in Ghaith Al-Omari, a former advisor to Yasser Arafat and former executive director of the American Task Force on Palestine. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us here on the programme. We've spent much of the last hour, frankly, the last 20 months, talking about the devastating situation that the Palestinians are under, the horrors of October 7, and then, of course, the horrifying situation for Palestinians over 20 months. And I guess much has been written about the absence of Palestinian leadership this entire time.
And rightly so. Because, frankly, Hamas has proven itself to be unworthy of leading the Palestinian people after the crimes of October 7th and the terror conducted by the Palestinian Authority. Also have proven itself to be unworthy. It's corrupt, it's unrepresentative, it lacks both credibility and capabilities. We have a serious legitimacy deficit in the Palestinian body politic, and without dealing with that, it's very hard to see how we move forward.
Indeed. I mean, not only are we dealing with the devastation of Gaza, the death toll going up every day, I mean, you know, no one has really heard in the last 20 months from Mahmoud Abbas. I mean, I know he's 20, but he remains there as the leader of the PA and yet is saying nothing and, frankly, deeply unpopular. And as you say, they're all deeply corrupt as well.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, this is, again, you're laying out the challenge. And I think, look, I mean, the good news, at least, if there is good news in this grim picture, is that this weakness and this lack of effectiveness is becoming not only a Palestinian problem, but a regional problem. Many Arab countries are very frustrated. They want someone to take over Gaza once the war is over. They think the Palestinian Authority is just not up for it. So we're hearing more and more pressure from Arab countries for the Palestinian Authority to get its act together, to reform, to get new leadership, etc. What makes this even more complicated, though, is that the Israeli government is not helping with this. The Israeli government saying the Palestinian Authority will not be allowed to come to Gaza after the war. They're trying to undermine it. You mentioned what's happened right now with the settlements. So we do need a strategy that, on the one hand, gets the Israelis to stop undermining the PA, but on the other hand, get the Arab countries to really push the Palestinian Authority to reform itself and to start regaining credibility.
Ghaith Al-Omari, we're grateful that you've joined us here on the programme. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, with reports of progress towards a ceasefire, it's hoped the fight for survival can be won by those Palestinians still in Gaza. We wait to see if diplomacy can triumph over destruction. Thank you so much for watching the programme. Good night.